Howdy.
Cool, cool,
Perfect.
cool. All right. How long have you been here? Did you just get here?
To the live or to
Yeah.
like your thing?
To the,
I was like maybe 2 minutes. I just saw you and Steve and Spence talk for like 2 minutes or so, but then I
oh, okay.
figured out.
Perfect, perfect, perfect. So real
Yeah.
quick, I have a couple of friends in the chat moderating today. Um,
Oh,
I went through and blocked all of the incendiary words. Like you can't say cult. You can't. Like I'm not delusional, brainwashed.
okay,
No. So
cool.
either find a thesaurus or just be nice,
I
preferably.
appreciate it. That's nice.
Um,
Thank you.
This was right on time, guys. We were even a little early
Yeah.
to the
Well,
projected
5 minutes.
time.
Um,
Um, so be nice in the comment section. If you are obnoxious, anybody, my follower or Spencer's follower, you're going to get muted. So there we go. Okay.
okay.
So your video, I haven't made a video on the subject yet. So my thoughts, I guess, could be gathered by a couple of random comments here and there. But when you first saw like BJ's video, like, do you want to explain your video a little bit more? Like, do you have context you want to add or anything?
No, not necessarily. Um, I think that my video is pretty self-explanatory. I
Mm-hmm.
think that the one thing they want to clarify were just things that I was requesting that like did not pop up on Ex Mormon TikTok. It was specifically like, specifically like things that we covenant not to talk about in the temple, as well as the robes and like lampooning all of that. Just kind of making fun of that and satirizing that. And so those are the three things that like very specifically I'm trying to just box out, and then everything else about the temple I'm kind of I think is basically free game as far as talking about it. You know, even making jokes about it. I think I'm more tolerant to that. But I think that I was just trying to box out like these very specific things as kind of things that maybe we should keep off limits. So
Okay.
that's the bit to clarify.
Okay, that makes sense to me. So with BJ's video, were you just saying as an example, if this video, because the only thing we covenant, I like don't want to offend you by like being too
Yeah,
specific, but like the signs and the tokens are the only things that we covenant to keep sacred.
I,
Nothing
correct, correct.
else, nothing else is under that covenant. And so in
That,
BJ's video, unless I was wrong, he wasn't using those things. So was it more of just like this is a general example,
yeah.
or is
So
it really
I
those specific things?
that was some valid pushback that I think I received from people. It's like, he didn't necessarily explicitly reveal anything, and I said that's correct. I think that he kind of walked to the cliff's edge though, and it was done so in a way that was
Gotcha.
public, right? It was done so in a way that was public and was clearly meant as like comedic content rather than educational content. He made a video in response to Bridger, in which Bridger also made a similar video, kind of calling him out, and he said like I'm just trying to provide. I think it's important that we talk about the temple robes. I think we provide education to new members, and my response to that was, well, where was the educational content in the video, in the original video? I think that the intent of the video was clear. I think that the intent was to create comedic content for former members of the church, and
Mm-hmm.
that I think he succeeded with flying colors, right? But yeah, I just think that there are some things that I think that pro LDS people and ex Mormon creators, we can. I think that there's a conversation to be had about what can be boxed out as far as like what we talk about and what spaces we allow to stay to stay untouched and inviolate. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that was the point of my video.
Okay. So if I would love to clarify and kind of refine your claim here, if I could, a little bit
Sorry,
before I
sorry.
start asking more specific questions. But do you feel that this is like a claim specific to ex Mormonism? So would your claim be something like, I or ex Mormons should not mock things that they promised to keep sacred while they were Mormon? Or would this be a broader claim that people who have made religious covenants not to disclose things shouldn't mock them later out of respect for the religion?
Well, I think that if I would lean towards the latter. I would lean towards the latter,
Okay.
making the people of ex religions. But I think that the more kind of philosophical point that we have to drill down on is like what deserves respect and what does not deserve respect, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's where kind of the crux of the debate is like, okay,
Yeah.
what deserves to be mocked? Because I think there are things that perhaps do deserve to be mocked. I
Yeah.
have no problem I have no problem with people mocking the Iranian government or Nazi Germany or 100 different other things that I don't believe deserve our moral respect. But the crux of the debate and the philosophical debate is like what deserves respect and what does not deserve respect, you know, and what is allowed to remain untouched. So,
Do you agree with the sentiment, people deserve respect, ideas don't? Just as a broad. So I'm not trying to lead you anywhere, just like trying to understand where you're going.
As a very broad general rule, yes, I could agree with that. I can agree with that statement.
Okay. Do you feel like there's exceptions where ideas would deserve respect?
Well, that's a great claim and one I could spend a lot of time thinking about, you know, or a great question, one that I can think about. I think it really depends. Maybe there's something to be said about the consequences of certain ideas. Maybe there's something to be said about the potentially harmful consequences of certain ideas.
Yeah.
I think there's something to be said about people holding to ideas that have been clearly debunked over and over and over again in increasing detail and with increased scholarship, and yet they continue to hold on to those ideas. People who hold to ideas of Holocaust denialism, you know, I don't know, those ideas, you know, not only those, now that idea in particular has both, you know, bad moral consequences, and it's been debunked, and it's easily debunked over and over and over again, and yet people continue to deny, people continue to engage in Holocaust denialism. So, I would say I would take a rule from my friend Daniel Peterson, who said that if a person is going to hold on to an idea for like more than maybe 5 or 6 years and try and defend it openly and with as much like respect and documentation as they possibly can, I think you can respect that. And I think that all of us as human beings, I do think that we, most of us at the very least, are orienting our minds towards what is the common good, answering that question, and then trying to rally people behind the question of what the common good is.
Okay.
And, you know, questions of the common good obviously involve questions of like personhood and equality and, you know, and morality. And so very complicated questions, but yeah, I think
for sure. I mean, these are super broad, like,
not gonna like very broad, very broad questions.
Yeah,
right?
super broad. So then,
but
okay.
I think those two criteria could probably nominate an idea for something that we do not. So like intellectual stability, something that's been debunked over and over and over again, is easily debunked, right? And then also
not reserve respect. So that would just
does not deserve.
Okay, look, the Earth is round. You don't get respect for this stupid idea.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you know, I don't mean to deny all conspiracies. Some conspiracies do turn out to be true, but then there are others that are just plainly false. And it's like,
okay. So in that scenario, no respect for the idea. But then you would say, so an exception to the rule that ideas generally shouldn't deserve respect would be an idea that have been held by a particular person who tried to defend it in good faith for, like, let's say, for the sake of argument, like 10 plus years.
Sure.
Okay.
And try to do it with actual documentation and
right. So like credibly defending it, not just over here like, well, I still think the Earth is flat. Okay. So I'm going to posit something to you. Somebody holds this idea for 10 plus years. Is it now, like, what does respect mean? Does respecting this idea mean that you can no longer criticize it? Or can we say ideas don't get respect, but people do? So if you have beef with this guy's idea, you can talk to him about it, but you can't be a jackass. You have to be respectful.
Yeah, right. I think that you can at least treat the person as intelligent. That's one thing. You can treat the person as at least trying to orient themselves towards the good and understand what the good is.
Mm-hmm.
And you can at least treat the person as like an intellectual person.
Respect I disagree. The person.
Exactly. I disagree with a lot of things that Kant wrote, you know, and I think I don't believe that a lot of what he wrote is true, mm-hmm. But I still see him as an intellectual giant, and he's still taught me a lot, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't necessarily have intellectual respect for his ideas, but I have incredible intellectual respect for him as an intellectual who theorized, who gave us, you know, many different ideas, you know, that have oriented us towards the common good and gotten us closer to the truth. So there's an idea.
So kind of, yeah, for sure. So at the end of this, I feel like what I'm hearing is that you actually do feel like, without exception, people deserve respect, ideas don't. Because I think
Yeah.
what we've established is that you can respect a person and not respect their ideas. And that doesn't, and you can do that without disrespecting the person. You can
Yeah.
disrespect the person while you do that, but you can do it without it.
Correct.
So, um, in that sense, if we agree that you can respect a person and not respect an idea, why would the temple as an idea, so not you as a person for believing in the temple, but the temple as an idea, so like the temple
Mm-hmm.
ceremony, I think we can just be broad here and say the temple ceremony, why does
Correct.
that deserve respect as an idea? Why would that be an exception to this rule that we've established? Why would that independent idea deserve respect?
Well, number one, I think that the temple is oriented towards the common good. So there's a point. I think that the temple is meant to orient our hearts towards each other and towards God in loving unity with one another.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly the temple holds, there are some assumptions that the temple holds and what the temple teaches that might be morally wrong to one group, but not be morally wrong to another group. So in particular for myself, I refer probably like to LGBT issues. Obviously the temple kind of teaches that there's like this whole cosmological constant of like male female
It's
reunions,
hard for queer people in the temple.
yeah, yeah, it's not a it's not a queer place, I guess you could say. Sorry, I'm not good with a lot of the terminology and everything,
Okay.
but so I'm going for respect here. And so yeah, I think that the temple is oriented towards the common good. I think it has a different idea of what the common good is than a lot of other people, and so I don't consider it harmful. And I think that the temple can deserve respect as it's recognized that it still orients itself towards a very respectable idea of what the common good is.
Okay.
Yeah, one that I think that can be very easily defended.
Yeah. I see how you could defend that position. Um, so
Audie,
one of
are you a philosopher by chance? I saw a video with you in which you were giving criticisms from David Hume to the Paley argument, to the
oh yeah.
watchmaking analogy. Did you study philosophy at one point, or
I did
like?
not. I just spend literally all of my free time thinking about the world.
Okay, cool.
So, okay. So here's why I would say that I don't believe that ideas should ever be given respect as a general rule. So not
Why?
that
What should not be?
why we shouldn't assign respect to ideas and why we should reserve it for people.
Okay, okay.
So I understand the idea of like respecting certain arguments. I'm with you. I see what you're saying. Here's why I would say that we just shouldn't respect ideas and we should just reserve that idea of respect for people. And that is, if you start to respect an idea, you begin to not question its goodness. So if we
Hmm.
say, okay, the temple is good because it orients us towards a common good. I know everybody in here in the comments is disagreeing with that. We're moving past that because we're trying not to get caught in the weeds.
I know that's
Okay.
reach an impasse there. I think, yeah.
Right.
So
It's okay. We don't have to discuss that right now.
yeah,
We're just gonna skate right over it because we want to be
right,
able to have this conversation.
right,
But if we say like, okay, I'm going to respect this idea of the temple because because the temple works towards a common good. Okay, already we have a ton of people disagreeing with that. So it's not a good place to like build common ground on like whether or not something needs respecting because you value the idea of giving respect to ideas and I don't. So
not well. And let's be clear about what type of respect that we're talking about.
that
I think that
actually,
there's
yeah, that'd be great.
because I think that we can differentiate perhaps between like an intellectual respect and like a moral respect. So, for instance, I respect the idea that 1 + 1 = 2 just because that's true, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I don't necessarily. Maybe there's a different kind of moral respect that you can have for something. So the sacred traditions or the sacred rites of a religion, and
Okay.
the sacred spaces that we create for each other. So maybe there's a type of intellectual respect that you can have for something, but then also perhaps a moral respect you can have for something because you see something as morally good and morally correct or wrong, or vice.
Okay. So what would disrespect of, I mean, I'm assuming disrespect of the temple would be evidenced by making a video in your temple clothes and performing the signs and tokens. That would be
Right,
considered, right? Okay.
right.
Um, So I don't believe in the moral respect for any ideas.
Okay.
And the reasoning is I do think it stops questioning of things. Like
Okay.
it not stops questioning, but like it's a conversation stopper. So like it starts to overreach and control where it shouldn't. It starts to kind of grow this mind of its own, and it becomes an untouchable topic, and it's we're not allowed to talk about, we can't disrespect the temple. And I don't see that as valuable. I would see it as more valuable to take any given idea and without assigning the value of respect to it, being able to think critically about it
Sure.
and being able to be like, well, this is just an idea. So for me to mock your personal experience in the temple, if like you in confidence had told me about a sacred experience you had in the slush room, and then I put on my temple clothes and like mocked you in that, I think that would be immensely disrespectful because I'm not mocking the temple. I'm mocking you.
Okay.
But if I'm just going to mock the temple, one, the temple objectively is just a thing, right? It's an idea, it's a concept, it's an experience, but it's an objective thing. So I believe that you should be able to mock it. Like, we can get into the specifics of how deep that goes, where and when and how is appropriate and that stuff. But I think that it's up for grabs because it's just an idea. It's not a person. I'm not attacking you. You might see that video and be like, I had a great experience in the temple. And so that really hurts my feelings. Like,
Yeah.
that's okay, but I'm not mocking you. So for you to take it personal, that's on you because I'm not mocking you. I'm just mocking this idea. And you had a different experience with it, which is also valid, just like mine
Right.
is.
Right.
But to then come in and police that and be like, well, but I had a sacred experience in the temple. Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah. No. And I think you're kind of getting at the same thing with Spencer and Steve in your other live with them. Here's kind of what I would say too, that the temple is not merely just a set of ideas or propositions. It's also a type of experience that people have with the divine, you know, as
Mm-hmm.
they perceive the divine. And I'm gonna get a little bit corny, but I read a great book by a guy named Blake Ostler, who's a Latter-day Saint philosopher and theologian. He wrote a good book called Fire on the Horizon, a meditation on the endowment and love of atonement. And it's one of the most beautiful books I think I've ever read in my entire life. I mean, of course, I'm a
Mm-hmm.
Latter-day Saint. I'm biased. Okay, I get that, but just
Yeah.
hear me out. He has a good metaphor in there that he says that the temple is such an experience, right? And uh, don't get uncomfortable. You guys, we're all sex positive here, okay? But you know, he says that like, the temple is so intimate. It's like like the sexual relationship between a husband and a wife, right? That once you start to kind of talk about it, and once you kind of start to describe it to other people, and once you kind of put it out in the open for other people, the relationship itself kind of gets cold and starts to become ossified, right? And so to see kind of the same experience, you know, that Latter-day Saints have with the divine lampooned as if it were just, you know, a bunch of culty people getting in marshmallow suits and doing weird culty rituals for a couple hours. I mean, that it just totally eliminates it. It's like pornography in a way, right? It just puts you into a space that you're not really invited to and you don't have any business in being inside of, right? And so I think
Well,
that there's
well, hold on. Let me push back on you right there for just a second because I know they're going
okay,
to freak out if I don't.
okay,
But they actually do have a right to be there because it's my experience too. So the temple is not just your experience. This is my personal experience. I don't mock other religions because I wasn't a part of them. So what that's doing is saying that I only own my temple experience so long as it aligns with what was intended. But like
sure,
that wasn't my personal experience. So
sure.
I'm not mocking your experience. I'm mocking my experience and my
And
and an idea.
and I think that that's why though that I'm still trying to create a box,
Mm-hmm.
you know, where we can talk about our experiences within the temple while also not getting to the spaces in which, you know, the vast majority of Latter-day Saints have had their most intimate encounters with God before, right? And, you know, sharing things that obviously were not meant for public consumption, you know, and
Can
meant
I can
not
I
meant to.
come back to you and say that is where many ex-Mormons that I've talked to have had their most traumatic experiences because it is still very significant to a lot of ex-Mormon people.
I would want
I
to know.
think
Yeah, and I would want to know exactly why, and I would love to talk to someone who has done that. So if anyone who has felt traumatized by, you know, the signs and the tokens, or has felt traumatized by, like the specific covenants that you make. I would like to hear about that, because just from my vantage, I don't see that the temple is oriented towards a person's bad. Maybe people don't have a good experience with the temple, but certainly the temple intends to orient us towards something that is good, something that is
Okay.
divine.
So now you're saying that my experience is less valid than the respect you have for the temple. And I know that's not what you're intending to say, but I want to elaborate a little bit.
Okay.
So I had some great experiences at the temple. I had some not great experiences from the temple. And to say, okay, I know that you may have had a bad experience, but the temple is oriented to do good. So again, you've now shifted to defending the temple as an ideology. You're not defending your experience with the temple. You're defending the concept of the temple.
I'm defending my experience and the experience of many other people in
But
the
we're
temple.
not talking about your experience. We're talking about my experience in the temple. You are
Okay.
inserting yourself into my experience. Does that make sense? So for me to say, okay, I'm just going to give you a hypothetical
Sure.
situation that's kind of a mishmash because I don't really want to share my super personal stuff.
Sure.
So, as like a woman, there was certain covenants that you used to make like 7 or 8 years ago. I don't know if you remember a lot about them. I'm trying to like be respectful.
A little bit more recent, actually. I think it was 2019 that they made some shifts with the temple.
Was it?
Yeah.
Was I still in? I was. Okay, I believe you. Anyway, it was a couple years ago, and they made some changes. And before that time was when I went through the temple, and that was pretty traumatic and struggling to me because when I came out of that temple, I knew that I basically nothing had changed for me because I had to wait to get married before anything would be enacted. So I know that's changed now, and I'm thrilled it's changed now.
Mm-hmm.
But that was my experience.
Yeah.
And I am allowed to have my experience.
Yeah.
I'm
No.
not talking about your experience. And so for
Sure.
me to go on there and talk about my experience in a way that feels good to me and that feels like it validates a lot of the betrayal that I feel, like
Yeah.
if you're feeling like you maybe just would like a little bit more of a way to empathize with people before you would be like, okay, that's a valid opinion. Like people really genuinely have had some pretty terrifying experiences in the temple. And so the temple as this objective thing, so independent of your or my experience, has good and bad things tied up in it. People have had some really traumatic experiences and people have had some life-changing mystical experiences.
Right.
Both.
Right.
So that's why ideas don't deserve respect, but people do.
Well, and again, that's why I'm trying to say that I'm not trying to invalidate that experience.
Okay.
I'm only talking about perhaps the way that we can talk about those experiences, right?
So by limiting the way that I'm allowed to express it, you are invalidating my experience because you are. And here's why I would think that, and then
okay.
you can tell me why I'm wrong.
Okay. Okay.
It's invalidating to me to be. So I feel like I was very controlled by the church, and I know a lot of people don't feel that way. That's my experience. I feel that I was very controlled by the church. So for the church and for members of the church to then tell me once I've left the faith that I still don't own my own experience to the extent that I can share it publicly, that feels deeply invalidating because that was an incredibly personal experience for me. So that's why it feels invalidating, because you're not saying you can't process this at all, but you're saying you can process this, but you got some rules.
Yes.
And I'm assuming, and here's the deal, you can have rules on how you go about the world, and you can expect people in your circle to behave by those rules. That's called boundaries, and that's on boundaries.
Yeah,
and
right.
It's fine. But to make the claim that we objectively shouldn't do those things, I think is incredibly limiting, and it takes away people's right to express their experience however they want. Now, there is harm caused when those videos are made, which I think is your concern, right? Because it offends people.
Right.
And that's not irrelevant. There's that quote from Bednar that says, like, choose to be offended. And I hate it so much because all it has done is everybody is in their fucking comment section like, you're just choosing to be offended. Well, Elder Bednar said you're choosing to be, and it's everybody going at each other. And I'm like, can we not? Like, can we not? Right. Nobody's choosing to be offended. Being offended is something that happens to you. So that is real. So from where I'm sitting, we have people making ex-Mormon videos. in their temple robes showing their tokens. What harm do you see that video as causing?
I see it as intruding on a space that doesn't need to be intruded on, and that doesn't deserve to be mocked. I think it can be described. I think it can be talked about. I think that just performing coming to the cliff's edge as far as revealing stuff that we specifically covenant not to reveal, and just getting up in temple robes and lip syncing to Olaf from Frozen. I think that's it's not really even expressing your trauma. It's just
Well, here it is. It is though. And I
it's
know it doesn't seem
just
that
making
way.
content.
Yeah, I know it doesn't seem like it's expressing trauma because it there's kind of this idea like in Mormonism and in Christianity in general that like anger is not good, like contention is of the devil kind of a thing. But it
Yeah.
actually is a super valid way to express your feelings. And like
Well,
therapists and
obviously,
psychology would agree with you there.
well,
But the
and
issue is the harm that's caused, right? So like somebody could be like, well, it would really help me express my feelings if I just punch that guy in the face. But we
yeah,
as a society are like, well, you can't actually do that though, because you're gonna hurt someone. You can punch a pillow,
right,
but you can't punch a person.
right,
Okay, cool. From there though, the harm that's being done is what you just said is like, but we're coming into the space of the temple. So I'm going to come back to ideas don't get space. People get space. So I can come into your space, like I can come into your DMs, I can come into your, like if we think about it in the physical world rather than the online world, like everybody's got their own place that they live. And then
right.
there's like a town square, which is known as the For You page.
Yeah, yeah, right,
So this concept of like the temple doesn't get a house because it's not a person. It's just something we talk about. It's an object of conversation. It's an experience to be had. And so when you say you're coming into the space of the temple, you're creating a space for something that doesn't you don't get a house. Like I'm talking about the temple in my house. I don't have to leave my house to walk down the street to talk about the temple. Like I do that in my house. If I'm in the town square talking about the temple, the town square's free game.
oh,
So you can say what you want in the town square, and if you go out in the town square, you understand you're probably gonna there's a chance you might see something that offends you that will do you harm. That's a risk that you take when you leave. So that video that BJ made, had he sent it to active members, had he put only pro LDS hashtags, I wouldn't support it either because I would be like, look, you used to be Mormon, and you know that if a Mormon sees that, it's going to hurt their feelings. And
right,
I just try I try not to hurt people's feelings. So like, I wouldn't do that personally.
yeah, right,
But to then police it and say, well, you can't make that video because you're intruding on a sacred space.
hmm
The only way that I can intrude on your sacred space is if I go into the temple with you, or if you're sitting with me and you are sharing, you're like, hey, Audrey, come into my sacred space. Like, I would love to share this thing with you.
How about
And then if I were to mock you, like that would be in your space. Do you see what I'm saying?
yeah, but let's flip the analogy a little bit because I don't know if that's quite analogous to what we're talking about here. I think this is more analogous to someone walking into your home and filming and secretly filming you and your partner having sex and then putting it online as pornography. That's how deeply I feel about it and how many Latter-day Saints
Okay.
feel. That this is the most intimate, the most close space that we can have with God.
Mm-hmm.
And people who don't have permission to be there and have no business being there are like we're walking to the edge of the cliff and like kind of letting the guy in. It's like almost like we're letting the guy in.
Yeah, I got you. So
Progressively kind of giving that man permission to walk in and be in spaces that he doesn't need to be in and has no business being in, right?
got you. So let me see if I can adjust this metaphor to something that would feel a little better for me.
Okay, go ahead.
It is not me sneaking into your house and filming you and your wife having sex and posting it on the internet as pornography. Rather, it would be, I was once married and I had sex with my ex-husband. And now with my boyfriend, I've decided to make a parody video about me having sex with my ex-husband and posting that on the internet. We're both having sex. It's the same thing. But I am not like, for you to then go on comment on that video and be like, you're personally attacking me because I have sex with my wife and this looks the same and I feel personally attacked. Like, it's not your experience. We're doing the same actions, but
Yeah.
no, I'm not mocking your experience. I don't approve of somebody mocking somebody else's spiritual experiences. I think that's a dick move. But
Mhm.
like, he's not mocking your experience. He's mocking his experience, and you're just doing the same thing. Like, you both worked at Wendy's. And like, I know that it's a little different because it's a temple and it feels so sacred. And so it's not the same as working at Wendy's, right? Like, it does feel very sacred and personal, but we have to let people have their freedom of speech, because the harm that's being caused is that somebody's feeling offended, which is real harm. I'm not saying that that's not important, but the solution to you being offended while you're in my house is for you to leave.
The solution for me being in your house,
And being offended by what I'm saying.
be offended by, reiterate real
Yep, I
quick.
got you. So
Reiterate.
if you're in my house and you're
Sure.
offended by what I'm saying, you can't call the police and be like, I don't like what she's saying. Get her out. Or make her stop. You're in my house. If you're offended, the solution is for you to leave. If
I think
there's other harm being caused besides offending people, the solution to not offending people is to like not showing it to them. Like, there, if we could talk about harm that happens outside of people being offended, and I'm not saying that that's not real harm, I'm just saying that the solution is for you to leave the space that's hurting you, not to
sure,
try and force the space to change around you.
sure, but you're also, but you're not, but also with in the case of TikTok, you're bringing the space to me. You know, you're not,
Not no, no,
and
I'm not.
you're bringing, and in the case of Brett, he's bringing the space to the public. He's not bringing it to just a select group of people. It's not a place that we can easily leave. It's something that pops up on our For You page, you know,
Okay, but when you see
something
it,
that
is your life immediately over? Or do you just be like, okay, scroll, or I'm going to block this creator? Like,
obviously,
to
obviously my
demand,
life, obviously my life isn't over. Obviously I
oh,
could
sorry, that was dramatic, but
no, no, no. Yeah, right. No, I get what you're trying to say, and I absolutely respect what you're trying to say. I'm just saying, you know, if he's going to, if he's going to create content and put it out publicly, then he's bringing the space to me, you know, and
well,
he
that would be true if he was like forcing you to be, again, if he was DMing it to you, that would be true. If it's on your For You page, that's public square, babe. Like, if it's, unless he is, unless somebody is personally sending it to you, this is all public square shit. Like, literally all of it.
don't you
The
think
point,
don't you think that we could still hold people to a higher moral though, as far as what type of discourse takes place in the public? We have a whole
I
concept.
here's the deal. I agree with you. I think that
We do have the whole concept of the Overton window, you know, and we shout down anybody who's openly racist on the internet. You know,
for
we
sure.
trash people who are online and openly
Can
racist
we,
on the internet.
yeah, can we talk about that real quick?
Sure.
So, here's why we shut down racism, because it leads to real world harm. It's not just offending people, it leads to violence and it leads to real world harm. That's why we don't allow racism and like racist speech being propagated, because it causes real world harm. It doesn't just offend people. If you're just offended, then like, sorry, dude, like, you're going to live in a world that disagrees with you. So while I agree with you that we can I think that we, especially as a community, we can set up rules of discourse, right? Like, I think that's really important. I mean, we have to as a society,
Right.
but you have to sell people on why they should follow your rules.
Well,
And I think one of the things that kind of
yeah.
put people off about your video is it didn't feel like you were selling people on why they should respect it. It felt like more of a demand. Um, and I don't think you intended it that way, but that is definitely how it was taken. I'll promise you there.
That's fine, you know. You know, but still, you also have to come from my perspective as well and see that I feel like there's a very sacred space that's being intruded on for no good reason. You know, I feel like I made a very like as polite of a request as I possibly could have for people to just
For
box
sure.
out a
But
very
to ask that
a very
people,
specific pace a space, and I also specifically said what types of things people could mention about it and how they could talk about it, and I was even willing to talk about that with them, have them, you know, find me for lunch, come be my Facebook friend, you know, we'll find a way to chat about your experience. But when it comes to this was not chatting about your experience. It was just creating comedic content for former members of the church.
Right, but you're now policing what somebody can do in the public square, and the only harm that's being caused is that
Yeah.
somebody's being offended.
Well, now here's another. No, I'm not willing to make that. I'm not willing to make that argument right now. But would you say that being offended is still? Could we say that being offended is still a type of real world harm? Can we say that disrespecting religions, and especially their most sacred spaces that have no reason to disrespect them, can lead to real world harm?
Actually, no, because I don't have any evidence that disrespecting the temple has led to real world harm.
Do you have evidence that disrespecting other religions has led to real world harm?
Not Christians, because they are the strong majority. So that's where it's a little
Okay,
different.
but wait a minute. You said not Christians. You said okay. Where does disrespecting religions lead to real world harm?
Well,
Anti-Semitism,
I mean,
right? Like that's the first.
We have lots of examples.
We have
there are a lot of differences, though. Those situations aren't analogous. So I see where you're coming from. It's not the same thing as speaking out against another openly marginalized group. So Christians, okay, I feel like we're getting off track here a little bit. I want to like come back to center a little bit.
Well, we're trying to.
That's okay.
Right? Yeah. So it's difficult because I think there's several.
There's like it's like a web. I know there's like 100 different things.
There's a couple different branches to like how we nail this down.
For sure. So
right.
I think so the issue I have with the original claim of like this is how we should engage is that it's overreaching into areas that aren't your space. So BJ, like Brett posted that on his personal TikTok page. He didn't send it to active members. And when you're on the internet, you might see stuff that you don't agree with. And the solution isn't just like, well, nobody make anything that I don't agree with. Like that's policing free speech in a way that I would consider to be dangerous. When there's demonstrative harm involved, we can talk about that, but there is no, I feel like you would have to falsify a situation to be able to make a defensible claim that Mormonism is somehow under threat. Mormonism has been under threat in the past, right? Like for whatever reasons you want to put behind it, they were driven out of the whole fucking country. Yeah. So that wasn't a great time for them.
I mean, you also
there have been past like what you could call persecutions, but in today's world, so specifically I said Christian, and we can talk about Mormon. There is no political interest held by the Mormon Church that is not held by Christianity at large. So you become part of that majority. 88% of Congress is Christian. There is no systemic threat to Christianity. It is non-existent. There is beyond a majority in all of this.
There is still yet a threat. Yeah, perhaps it might not be as widespread, but I mean, even the vandalism of chapels has increased dramatically just in the past like 2 years. I mean, there is that to consider. That's true. That there is vandalism to consider. That there are ex-Mormon, maybe, or just generally people who are against the church, anti-Mormon, that believe that we're a sex abuse cult, and we're protecting abusers, and we're having our property vandalized because of that. Mm-hmm. And so there is some sort of harm, and I mean, not holding things sacred is what led to the destruction of many different civilizations. I think of the Spaniards conquering the Mayans, and how we have absolutely nothing. We have absolutely nothing on the Mayans today because the Spaniards destroyed so much of their shared culture and history, just because they wouldn't allow. They couldn't create some sort of more complex moral space that they could box out that would have allowed them to keep a shared culture and history and keep some sort of sacred traditions and sacred rights.
Yeah, that is interesting.
I recognize that I'm not piecing together this analogy perfectly.
No, I got you. I'm following you.
I don't have like a perfect evidentiary line, to line up with.
No, even the destruction of chapels, I got you. That makes sense to me.
No, I'm just saying that without some sort of, I do think that without some sort of box, without some sort of shared ideas about what we can talk about and how we can talk about it, it can lead to just aggravated violence. It can just, the violence can bubble over from the conflict from that, I think.
Interesting. It does feel like, so as like from a distance, and I get you, and I really appreciate that. I would like you to just take a second and take a breath,
Sure.
and not you, but to the chat,
Oh,
and realize I just asked him for more evidence and he provided it. So pay attention. They do provide evidence. um, so I think the destruction of chapels is a little bit more small scale.
yeah,
I'm not saying that it's not important, because you
absolutely.
did make a point
I
that
agree.
that kind of thing. I would say I don't know that it's temple videos that are like necessarily doing that. I think,
Correct. That's also correct, I think.
yeah. So I guess, what is your concern? Is your concern that temple videos are going to cause people to like kind of like start this? I don't want to, like, I'm not trying to strawman you when I say slippery slope, but like essentially it would be a slippery slope. Like,
Right.
start this wave of like, well, people are going to dance in their temple robes and share the signs, and then that's going to lead to more disrespect, and then suddenly we're going to be in like this horrible violence against people, and it'll turn into some kind of hate speech.
I recognize the slippery slope fallacy that I'm already kind of imbibing in with that,
Yeah,
And
but I'm just
I,
wondering, like, what's your concern? Is your concern more that it offends people and shuts down conversations, or is your concern more that like real world harm is going to be caused? Because that's where I feel like we kind of got off into the weeds a little bit.
much more the former than the latter, right?
Okay, so can
Don't,
we let go the real world aspect and just focus on like hurt feelings kind of a
well,
thing?
I mean, yeah, topically we can just discuss the former, but I don't think that we should let it go in terms of like importance. I don't think that it's something
No,
that
no, no, not importance, but if we could
we
just
just,
like set that down for a second, because if that's the main concern,
yeah,
because like, while I see where you're coming from and how there potentially could be a defensible argument, it seems like your stronger argument is based in this main portion, and that due to the like slippery slope nature of your claim kind of
yeah, correct,
will go
correct,
down really quickly. So,
correct.
cool. So when it comes to like feelings being hurt, there are things you can do to not see X-Mormon content. You can block the hashtag. And I've heard people say, well, that's going to cause us to not be able to communicate. I think that this is giving this idea that there are two kind of people, and that there are Mormons and that there are ex-Mormons. There are tons of people who are exist more like in a gray area, who, and I'm not saying in like a Jack Mormon way. Like, I would say I exist more in a gray area these days, and I am not a member in any, like, I'm an atheist. Um, but I'm interested in having good faith conversations with members. Not everybody is, and not everybody needs to be. Um, and so members who aren't going to be able to handle seeing people process their grief in a specific way, I think can block the hashtag. And like, because you still have some ownership of your experience. I have ownership of the things not only that I experience, but the things that I have. And well, I see your point that it's not particularly helpful to like foster conversations and goodwill. I think that's totally fair. I understand how people are offended by it. I would have been immensely offended by it. But I think if you're offended by it, the solution is to leave the space, not demand that the entire world cater to you. Like, if somebody, I'll tell you right now, Mormons, if somebody is making a video in their temple robes, they're probably not nuanced.
Yeah.
So you can just block them, probably. Like, they're probably not going to want to engage with you in good faith. So you can just block them. Like, but this idea that people shouldn't do it, I think that you have some ownership over your experiences. And again, if you were to disrespect a person, I think that would be a different conversation. But just to mock these things, like, mocking is definitely part of healing. It is very, very cathartic. Like, humor is a way that you process trauma. And whether or not you can understand why somebody experienced trauma, you have to believe people who've told you that they had. And it doesn't mean you need to go burn down your local temple.
Mm-hmm.
But like, that's part of the compassion of this conversation.
Sure.
Of just being like, hey, this really hurt me. And if I'm currently in a space where I'm going to make videos dancing in my temple robes, I'm not ready to talk to members.
What if
And that's okay.
what if we could just say that the comedic content could remain in private among your own people and just not on the internet? Because the internet still is a different
Right, but again,
it's a
then
different well, it's a different space, and it's a
For
different.
sure.
And
But
even if I do,
internet,
hang on, wait a minute.
oh, sorry.
Even if I do post my content with all pro LDS hashtags, I still post my content knowing that there might be at least 1 to 10 ex-Mormons that are going to watch my video and are going to be judging me based upon how well I present my position, how respectfully I present my position, what sorts of rules of dialogue I engage in. I share my content wanting to be respectful, wanting to open up a space where all of us can feel welcome, and comfortable at the table. And if it doesn't, and if we can't do that, then there's absolutely no progress. There's absolutely no progress to be made. So, especially on something like this, in which, religious people have been trying to segment off their sacred space for millennia, right? Why
Mhm.
can't we just let sacred space be sacred space and at least talk about sacred space? We can absolutely disagree about whether or not it's sacred, but just keep certain things about the sacred space sacred. It doesn't seem like it changes. It doesn't seem like it changes whether or not someone can share their trauma. It doesn't seem that someone can seem to change the fact that someone can respond and share their positive experiences about the temple.
Mhm.
It does. I don't think that there's any sort of real net loss to anybody's experience just by segmenting off the things that I mentioned at the very beginning of the live. And so
Yeah.
I don't I can't understand it. I can under I your argument has some merit, but I still think that the internet is a different animal, and whether or not we try to keep it in a space, it still will bleed over. And that's also another thing that I've tried to clarify in my other videos is that, like, there was my video number 21 where I'm responding to criticism of 20.
Yeah, I saw that one.
And I tell, and Spencer, he was a nice guy. He's like, oh, like, I understand you got mental health stuff. I won't engage anymore. And I'm trying to tell people, no, like, you can absolutely engage. I'm just not going to create videos that are directed that way. I'm kind of
Yeah,
getting
that's
on.
probably a good move. No, honestly, like that's probably a good move. Like
Yeah, I'm not going to address the ex-Mormon
I
community
I wouldn't if I were you.
anymore.
I would say that's probably a good
I'm gonna
idea.
create content. And if you're following me, or if it ends up on your For You page, great. But I'm not gonna say, hey, Exmos, let's have a talk. Let's have a chat, and all come together
Yeah.
and hold hands for a little
So
bit. No,
I,
but
I I I feel like I really do see what you're saying. My only thing is like, so to just say we can't do that stuff on the internet, it's implying that people have support groups locally. When I left the church, I was literally completely alone.
there was another woman who made a similar video to yours. So yeah, elaborate on this, because I'm
Yeah.
thinking more about this point, and I need to kind of refine my own thinking on this. So yeah,
Yeah,
go
I
ahead.
got you. So here's the deal. The internet is a super important place for people to connect, especially post COVID. Like, we have connected on the internet,
Right,
right? Like,
right,
it is a safe space for a lot of people, not just immunocompromised people, but people with social anxiety. Like,
sure,
this is the way that we communicate. And
sure.
for like a lot of us. And so to just say, well, you can't do that stuff on the internet, you're policing the public square. So you're not setting boundaries based on what can happen in your own home. So for you to be like, hey, if you want to be on my page, you got to be respectful of the temple. These are my rules, and I will kick your ass off this page. I will block you so fast.
Yeah,
That is totally fine. But it's when it becomes that of policing the public square, that's when I have issue. Um,
right. And I think that's the whole crux. That's one of the major cruxes here.
yeah, is like whether or not you can police the public square, and to say like, okay, I don't think it takes away from your trauma to not share these certain elements. You may feel that way, or you clearly do feel that way. Didn't mean to sound belittling. um and you know what, I would tend to agree with you, but that doesn't mean that I get to police how somebody else feels their trauma, because it's their experience. Like, should they do that? I don't know. Like, should people be jackasses? No. But like, I guess just do it in your own house. Like, if you're going to do it, just do it in your own house. And so when things go out onto the For You page, it is still the public square, Like, if you're following somebody and then they post something that offends you, it would maybe be appropriate to like get in their comment section and be like, hey, I'm not going to lie to you. Like, as a Christian, I kind of thought this was a safe place to be. Like, I'm feeling a little attacked here.
Hmm.
Then
Wait.
you've already
So
engaged in this space.
So wait a minute. So if I was so sorry, let's reiterate the situation. If I was following this person and then they created that and then they created the video, or what was the what
Yeah,
was the
so if you were following Brett and then he and you as like an active Mormon thought it was like a safe place to be,
uh-huh.
and then maybe you could have a little bit more of a conversation. I still don't think you'd be allowed to police him in his own home, but like you could be like, hey dude, like I thought this was like what the fuck? Like you know you have a Mormon following. Like why would you do this? But that's not Brett's page. It's not designed to be Mormon friendly.
Mhm.
Like it's not designed for active members. It's designed for ex members. And so just like you want to have your safe spaces, I want to have my safe spaces too. And when you use like a hashtag of ex-Mormon and stuff, it doesn't guarantee that it's not going to come up on a member's page. But I see offensive stuff on my page all the time. And I just scroll because not everything in the world was made for me. And when I'm in the public square, I can't just like scream at somebody for like expressing their own feelings. And so while I would personally tend to agree with you, like I processed my Mormon trauma. I mean, now somebody's going to go stalk my whole page and like find my angry Exmo phase and be like, she's the worst, see? But like, I would tend to agree with you. I don't think that would absolutely be necessary, but I also don't think that that you have the right to police that. Like healing and humor, because what it feels like to an ex-Mormon is that I'm trying to heal from this religion that really hurt me, and I still have to follow the religion's rules while I do that. And that feels so limiting and so rude.
Yeah.
And just really like you're stepping out of your bounds to tell me how I can heal my trauma. If you want to enforce a personal boundary with me and be like, Audrey, if you post this stuff, I'm going to block you. Then that's your personal boundary. You can protect your own space.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like if you are on the For You page, you step into someone's space and it offends you, you have two choices. Like you can comment or you can scroll. Or if it's hateful, you can report the video.
Right.
But like to then just demand that people in the world don't create things that hurt your feelings seems a little bit of too broad of a claim. Like how are we going to parcel this out now? We're just in this giant cycle of like, but you offended me. Well, I'm offended that you're offended by my beliefs. Like
Well, let's shift to another analogy and maybe drill down on some more questions here, on some different questions, because then we can explore some other territory. So, okay, say you and I are on a walk in the public square, and we see a man. We walk by a park, and we see a man up on a soapbox in a park, performing in blackface. Would we walk past? Would we walk past the man without infringing on what he can talk about within the public square? Would we go? Would we go push him over? What would you and I do personally in that situation? What do you think?
So this is a really good question. And I think this is stepping back into the space that we were just in a little bit. Is that where you're headed?
Just talking about what is the appropriate. What are some
Right.
appropriate?
No, I got you. I got you. So
What
what
is
this is going to
what?
turn into
Yeah, and
is
what shut down from the public square?
yeah. So I totally agree with you here. This is where I think we're gonna you're gonna fall back into a slippery slope fallacy, and this is why I think that.
Well, now wait.
Blackface.
But now wait, because
I'm just
blackface.
gonna follow you though. I'm gonna let you lead me where you want to go. So I'll just follow you. So if we were going through the public square,
Yeah.
and we saw somebody performing in blackface, I would probably say something, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like I would be like, "Are you fucking kidding me? This is racist." Like we don't do racism, remember? Like
Right.
racism has proven over and over again to be very violent and not okay. So your freedom of speech, like I don't know. If you're in the public square, you're in the public square. But when things become dangerous, then you have this moral question of like, okay, what do we allow and what do we not allow? And so what I would say is like we have like mountains of evidence that racism is dangerous. It's a dangerous ideology.
So
I would say no, you can't say that in the public square.
okay, so blackface obviously arose out of ideas of racism, that people that black people were inferior to other people and didn't really deserve the same type of respect and dignity as other people within the public square, right? So it seems to me that a public performance of the endowment would also similarly mean that people are somehow seeing that Mormons are not Could, could it be argued analogously that people are saying Mormons are inherently of some sort of lesser worth in our own mind by doing the same thing? Maybe that's not a perfect. I'm asking questions.
Yeah, it's definitely not a perfect analogy, but I got you.
I'm asking questions out loud. Please allow me to just.
I was gonna say they're gonna ruin you for the racism reference,
Yeah,
but
no,
I get what you're saying.
I am not nearly arguing that like the historical experience of African Americans in the United States and the historical experience of Mormons in the United States are equal. They're perfectly not. I'm just saying what then, because when does that like type of thing, that type of public performance, even though that type of public performance doesn't immediately lead to violent harm, how much violent harm then would be necessary in order to say, okay, yeah, public performances of Mormonism and lampooning Mormonism, we need to absolutely stop that. How much evidence needs to accumulate before we then say, okay, yeah, now we need to leave that out of the public square?
So are we still talking about videos where like you just, so my question is, what would be the difference then in that scenario of a video that shows the signs and tokens versus a video that doesn't show the signs and tokens? Like, is that different, or are we just now policing all ex-Mormon expression?
Restate the question one more time.
Okay. So we're in the public square. How much evidence needs to accumulate? Back to the original point, because I want to stay on the specific claim and not like broaden it out too much.
Right.
What is the difference then between a video that shows the signs and tokens and a video that doesn't show the signs and tokens? Because those could be functionally identical, as we've talked about now. So what is the difference? Like, are we going to just police all ex-Mormon speech now, or is this really just about the signs and tokens specifically, and that they should not be shared publicly?
Right now, I'm just saying that I would hope that the signs tokens would not be shared publicly, and I would hope that it would just not come to blatant mockery, and especially on a space like the internet. Sorry, I hope I didn't black out. Especially on a space like the internet that is already public. Lots of people are watching, and
so
I don't know.
You're losing me a little bit, because originally it was like, okay, just the specific signs and tokens are the problem. But with this specific scenario that you're talking about in general, it wouldn't matter if the video had the signs and tokens or not, if it's going to eventually lead to harm being done, because it would be in some function hate speech, which I'm not discounting. But showing the signs and tokens versus not showing the signs and tokens is not going to make a difference there.
I could probably agree with that.
Like that, whether or not, if the issue is the performance of Mormonism in the public square, whether or not you show the signs and tokens doesn't matter. So in that scenario, BJ's video would be just as dangerous as a video of somebody showing the signs and tokens. That would be the same amount of danger, essentially, because they're functionally identical. Right. So now we're just talking about policing the way that ex-Mormons express. We are not specifically talking, which the original claim was, you should respect this specific signs and tokens thing. So we would either have to expand that to all of the temple, and then probably eventually all religious feelings, or
perhaps
we don't, right? So that's
perhaps, yeah.
I guess you could kind of construe that as like a slippery slope argument, but I actually don't think that it is, because it's functionally the same. So the original claim kind of dissolves if that is your evidence for it, because then it doesn't matter. And it's not about the specifics. It's just about the ideology of ex-Mormonism, or potentially what could be branded as anti-Mormonism, which anti-Mormonism to me would be for like people calling for violence against Mormons. Yeah. That's not okay. I would never support that. You know what I mean? Like, right. I don't even like it when people are like, well, it's a good thing that Joseph Smith got shot. I'm like, okay, but like, do we have to advocate for violence though? Like, he wasn't my favorite person, but like, do we have to be violent about it? Right. But now we're just policing the way ex-Mormons express, because it is no longer specific. Like, right. We've left that claim behind. So I guess my question is, do you want to create a new claim, or do you want to like revert to the old one? Because this argument of like harm in the public square is not supporting your original claim.
Well, it seems to me that harm in the public square preceded us taking offense to things like blackface. Major harm in the public square, slavery, Jim Crow.
Right. So I got you.
Major harm in the public square preceded us, saying, okay, wait, no, performances of blackface, those are associated with racism. We condemn racism. We don't want to deal with that, and we're not going to tolerate that anymore.
Yeah. So I get you. I hear what you're saying.
I guess my core question that I'm trying to develop myself and think for out myself is how much violence or how much persecution or how much, what else would need to happen in order for something like the public performance of Signs and Tokens or
before everybody's like, you can't say that about
you can't do that anymore. Yeah. We've now
okay.
outlawed that
and
from the
I think that's a fair question, and I don't
where's
think
that where's that, you know what I'm saying?
Right. Like how many catastrophes do we need? How many chapels need to be defaced before people start taking this seriously, kind of a thing?
Right.
Okay. So here's my problem, and I have no issue with that. But then I feel like I would need you to have another, like, to restate your claim, because originally it was like people shouldn't do Signs and Tokens. Like, you were pretty specific about it, walk along the.
There's two arguments. There's kind of one about, all right, just respecting sacred space so that we can all have a positive space to talk about. But then there's also a separate argument of like, when does violence against Mormons or, when does persecution actually become persecution? When does a persecution complex become actual persecution? And when do things like this type of thing not become tolerated? What's that line in the public square? So there's,
got you.
I think I'm actually asking
conversation. So I got you.
I'm almost asking two separate questions, I think. But
yeah, I agree with you. I think it's two separate things. My concern here is that you're using this argument of like, when does persecution become persecute? Like, how much more is it going to take, essentially, to justify saying people shouldn't talk about the Signs and Tokens? But that doesn't support that at all. It supports an entirely different thing, which would just involve the complete and total tone policing of ex-Mormons. So it wouldn't. Does that make sense? So it doesn't support your specific claim. So my question here is, are you talking about Mormons shouldn't make videos with the Signs and Tokens, or are you saying it's the spirit of the thing? It's the ethos that's the problem. It's the idea that you're mocking something that someone else does that's the problem. Well, because I feel like that's a lot less defensible of a claim, to be honest. But it feels like that's what you're leading to. Like, I have no issue with them being two separate questions, but the problem I'm hitting is that I feel like
the second question doesn't have any evidence to like support it. So why ask the question in the first place? Is that?
No, because they're absolutely, that is absolutely a valid question, like 100%, because, I mean, most of this shit didn't happen overnight, right? Like, it builds up, it's public opinion, people start hating people, here we go, down the train.
It builds up on Twitter, it builds up on social media in general, and then it does spill over. So it's like,
so I think that's incredibly valid, and I think that's a totally like ideologically valid argument to take. But I don't see how it supports the first one. And that is my question.
That's okay. And that's support. That's, just right for right now, I can agree that there's not the type of evidence to support my first question. I can agree with that.
Okay.
And like I said, this is not my. I feel
like we're refining positions here. You're totally fine. Yeah. I'm not trying to like get you.
This is not my primary argument for this position. It's just kind of like, well, it does seem that there is a certain space in which, we actually do police the public square, in which we don't just scroll past, in which we don't. And so what point do we reach? What actually has to happen? And I'll probably need to think about this on my own more. What more needs to happen before we actually do say, okay, Mormons, no, they need space and they need to have, their own.
Can we table one or the other? Because that's my concern.
Let's table this one. Can we? I really don't. I don't to get into. I'm not comfortable continuing to make comparisons between race, because I know that I'm going to say something.
No, you're good. You're good. Okay, so we'll table this one, so we won't use it as any sort of support for the current argument.
Because I don't want to accidentally say something like just utterly just.
Yeah. Well, this is
stupid,
super like awful. Yeah. You're good. You're good. And I don't want you to feel like tricked or trapped into that. Especially because it's not it's not even a comparison. Like, that's not what we're talking about. We're looking at systems of how things functioned, not comparing the suffering between
yeah, no.
That's not what's happening here.
Yes, 100%. So, okay, let's go back to this first question, though.
Okay.
Like, is there a space in which we can table? Is there just a space that can remain sacred? This block that I'm talking about right now. Oh, by the way, do you want to go to maybe 45 and then call it a night? 7:45.
Sure. Actually, I just thought of a space. Can I like throw this in really quick? Because I've been thinking of this my whole time of like, it can't be that the only place for you to hold things sacred is within yourself. Like, there has to be some space that we respect. So I agree with you. And here's what I would say. The place where you deserve respect is places that you privately create with people and being like, hey, here's our bubble and here's what we respect. I think when you go broad and say people shouldn't do this in the public square, as we've already established, that's not even a conversation that we can have right now. So I feel like a much more productive conversation is like, hey, ex-Mormons, here's what I'm thinking. I would love to have conversations. Maybe in this square, let's not do temple videos because we're all trying to be here. And I feel like I can't be here if I'm constantly feeling attacked. Like, that seems like a much more productive conversation, because the conversation of whether or not we can police the public square is just not even, we don't even have the data to have that conversation. Like, neither one of us is prepared to have that conversation. So maybe we could talk about that in 10 years when we have more information. I don't know, or whatever. But like, then the spaces, so like, I don't want to keep using physical examples. Okay. So if you have like a group chat or even let's go with like Saints Unscripted TikTok page. They were the last Mormon TikToker that I saw. Sure. And they have a community. Like, they have more of a community going on.
Sure.
So for an ex-Mormon to go into the comments section and like reply to the comment of a video comment to somebody being like, I remember my own temple experience. It was really special. And then for them to be on there and like dancing in their temple robes, super disrespectful, report the video. That's what I would do. Super disrespectful, report the video. You are going into somebody else's safe space that they've created and harassing them. I don't think that's ethical. I think that's not okay. But like, for somebody to be in the town square, I don't think that we can make a move on that yet. I think it's fine to start the conversation, but to purport a claim that we would have any way of censoring that, I just don't think that we have that information. And so it doesn't feel very productive to me. It feels like right now, the compromise that would be reasonable to ask for would be like, don't harass people in their own space. And if you accidentally wind up in a space that's not meant for you, just like scroll. And if you think that it's legitimately causing harm, then report the video. Like, if you see a video and you're like, you can't just like call for violence against Mormons, like, I'm going to report you, right?
Definitely, obviously I wouldn't be making a request if it were calling for violence. I'd be,
same. I wouldn't either, right? Like, I don't support that either. Like, I don't support videos of people harassing members. Like,
destruction of temples, destruction of chapels. Yeah, I'd be.
No, that's not okay. Like, I disagree with the existence of chapels and temples, but like, violence is never like a great thing to like call for, you know? Like, I don't personally, I'm more of a pacifist. So like, I don't like the destruction of chapels. Like, I've been very angry with the Mormon Church, but I've never thought that it was appropriate to go attack the building. Like, although I understand why people do it, like, I get it, right? And that's a whole nother conversation. But it seems to me like the compromise that would be reasonable to ask for would be like, hey, you don't harass me in my space. I won't harass you in your space. And for those of you who are interested, let's make a community and we can lay some ground rules, right? Like, you don't tell me I'm delusional, I won't tell you you're delusional. So I think just the claim of the public square and policing the public square, while I'm open to further discussion in theory, seems like a pretty off base like request. And that's why it sounds so unreasonable, because we just have no way of even having that conversation yet.
Well, it certainly seems to center again on this question of violence and harm, right? And
I get you. And we kind of talked about how that could theoretically be a conversation. I'm not saying that that's not a conversation that needs to be had. I'm just saying that we don't have enough information right now to be making declarations or claims about what would or would not cause harm. I'm not saying it's something we shouldn't be aware of and shouldn't continue to look at and be just like, hey, like, we're churning up a lot of hate here or whatever. Like, I'm not saying that it's not important, but I'm saying that to claim, okay, well, you guys should just stop doing this in the public square. We just don't have enough information to like start policing people's behaviors. That we can encourage them to not be mean to each other and to be polite. I think that is something we can absolutely push for. But I don't think we have near enough information to police the public square. And that's where the pushback comes from. Because like theoretical harm, sure, but we've already established that like we don't have enough information to even we've already decided like we're not even going to have that conversation because we don't have the data that we would even need. And I know part of the question is how much data is enough data, right? But like even that, we even have that question. We don't even know how much data we need. So how are we going to start making rules that disproportionately favor one group of people?
Well, and again, that's, I mean, and would you say that I'm disproportionately favoring one group of people just by bracketing off one set of things and one particular attitude that you take while discussing those things? Am I favoring Latter-day Saints too much over ex-Mormons in that instance?
Are you trying to apply those rules to the public square or to your spaces?
Well, you said that. Man, now I'm starting to lose my train of thought.
So are you like saying if you want to engage in conversation with me, you can't do these things? Or are you saying you can't do these things in the public square? Because my argument is you have no reason to say you can't do these things in the public square because you don't have a conversation about harm yet. All we have is a very theoretical.
Because what you said that you said that I might be creating rules that favors one group of people, right?
So I wanted to clarify if you wanted to apply these rules to the public square or in a private setting, because my answer would probably be different. So I just want to clarify that.
I want to apply what you said about creating rules that favor one group of people over another to this particular situation.
Sorry, that wasn't my question.
Okay.
So my question is, so your list of rules, we keep doing this. Your list of rules, are you trying to apply them to the public square? Are you trying to say that you can't say these things in the public square? Or are you trying to say you can't say these things in my space or in a space that you want to be friendly to Mormons? Where are you trying to apply them?
My argument is aimed at the public square. I aimed it at the broader ex-Mormon community, where I view this behavior as more prominent than among other, like a normal Christian community or atheist community.
Gotcha.
From the ex-Mormon community in the last, 2 years alone, I've seen 4 videos similar to BJ's, right? I saw one of a girl in skates. I saw another one of a girl, I saw.
So I'm not denying that they exist
of the same type that now I'm kind of trying to say, okay, ex-Mormons, this is where this is.
I got you. So here's the thing. With the claim that you should apply these rules to the public square, my rebuttal to that is you have no good reason why. They're arbitrary, and it is overreaching in a way that I don't see a need to regulate, because we don't have any, even saying like, hey, maybe we should avoid this kind of behavior because I just feel like it could lead to this place. Okay, but to make the definitive claim of like, you shouldn't do these things for, well, I guess I don't really have a reason yet. I just have this theoretical idea. Like, you don't have a good reason yet. Like, you don't have a reason why that specific limitation should be applied, other than you seem to want some limitation applied, and this seems like an easy one.
No, I think I've given the reason that I think it's sacred. I think it.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean easy one. I just meant like, I understand why it's sacred, but there's no good reason why it should be policed in the public square, because there is no, as of this point, argument to be made for future harm. We don't have the data to have that conversation. So to be looking forward into the future and saying like, hey, this could potentially be a problem. I see what you're saying there, and I think you have some validity. I think it's something we need to watch and take care of.
there's three. Yeah, we're now talking about reasoning for why we shouldn't talk about it in the public square. One is like, okay, this is sacred to somebody and it's oriented towards the common good. One is, oh, this might cause violence elsewhere. One is, oh, there's been violence elsewhere, and therefore there's like four different sets of reasoning that I think we're trying to debate whether or not they're good reasons for the conclusion of we shouldn't talk about these particular things in the public square. I
Okay.
think
It's
my
like,
my my main argument is that there are things that my main arguments are it's a sacred space, and the sacred space is oriented towards the common good, and things that are oriented towards the common good can deserve respect even though we don't agree with them. And
okay.
I'm also saying, and I think that that's reasonable as well, given the rules that I've set up for it. I've said, hey, just don't reveal the absolute most sacred things about the signs and tokens, and don't just lampoon it.
Okay.
So now,
So
if that's going to be invalid reasoning at all costs here, I think that we've then just reached an impasse, and I just don't think that we're going to agree.
So I think we could reach an impasse here, or I think we could reach a little bit of an agreement. So because you're the one who wants to regulate it in some way, which we regulate speech all the time in society, everybody. We regulate, like we've discussed, we regulate against racism, we regulate against hate speech. Like this is not something new that he's reporting, but what he's wanting to do is add a new kind of set of social rules. So in order to convince me to do that, you'd have to give me not just reasons I accept, but like a rational way of getting there. So something like this could cause future harm. I'm not opposed to that idea, but there's currently no real argument to be made there. There's just a potential future argument. And that doesn't mean it's an irrelevant piece of evidence, but it does make it significantly weaker. So it's not saying that that's not a good reason. It's just not as good of a reason if it would be if there was an actual argument instead of just a hypothetical on the other side of that. The other
Well,
thing with it being a
it seems
sacred space.
it seems only that you've accepted a different form of reasoning for valid about what can and cannot be policed in the public square. That's fine. I just think that I don't think that that's the only thing or even the primary thing that we should consider. Then at that point we have reached an impasse, because you're saying the only time that I would respect this and that like taking this down from the public square would be once there has been a threshold of suffering from this particular community such that it's just not appropriate anymore to make any sort of joke, any sort of,
No.
words.
That's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is like, as the argument as it stands right now today, like there isn't a hypothetical argument behind that point right now. So I still think it's important. I don't think that it's just like, well, we'll just let a group suffer until they peter out and then, oh, I guess we shouldn't make these jokes anymore. Absolutely not. Like, I think it's valid, and it's definitely given me pause to consider, like, okay, like there has been like some retaliation towards the church, which is, I don't think is okay. But to police the public square, the reason I hesitate so much is because of free speech. And because we want to make sure that we're entertaining as many ideas that we can without entertaining intolerant ideas. So to me, I think that this conversation is one that I think should continue. And I think it's something that we need to keep talking about of like,
I need to think about, I need to already think about a lot of, I need to think about a lot of what's been said here, just because I gotta follow my own. I gotta follow your, I gotta follow your.
no, there's like a lot to consider here. And like so for me, for right now, I feel like, okay, I don't feel like the conversation, and I think most of the ex-Mormon people that I know would agree, I don't have enough information yet to be able to be like, yeah, okay, I'm willing to conform to those rules. Like I personally don't post temple videos and don't plan to, but like I don't see a reason why that should be enforced yet. But where I do see is I'm like, well, I don't want to be insensitive to your harm and the harm that you feel. So for me, a compromise would be keep out of each other's space, because that is a real problem that we're having right now. And like you can enter someone else's space, but you can't be mad about what you found there.
Right.
Right. And I think if we can continue this, and not just you and me, but like as a group of humans who interact on the internet,
in the very very niche corner of the internet that we
in a
own,
very
right?
niche corner of the internet that has a whole fucking lot of people in it.
Yep.
Like, if you want to, like, I think this is a conversation we need to keep having.
Sure.
I think we need to break down black and white thinking between everyone.
Sure.
But I think the reason that you're getting a ton of pushback is because the position that you currently hold, while it does have merit, just isn't strong enough to convince I hate saying the ex-Mormon community because we're all just like a bunch of little independent blobs, but like this online community.
That is, I just tangentially, I recognize kind of the weirdness of saying community all over the place. Oh, the Mormon, the ex-Mormon community.
I know.
Oh, the Black LGBT community. It's like
but
I think there was like it's like all right, ex-Mormon community, take me to your leader. Like
I know, but for real, right?
That's not how any of us operate. You know, it's just like how we have to think about it. I guess
we're all individuals and we do function within a whole, but like I think that's the reason so much of this pushback has happened. And I love the idea of like fostering goodwill and stuff. And so, and stuff that sounded so flippant, but I love that idea of like building these bridges and being able to have these conversations. And I'm not against laying down these ground rules, but my argument today is not that we shouldn't do what you're saying. My argument is just that I think a better compromise for the time being is let's just stay the fuck out of each other's space if it's not about us, and then we just let it go, and we can keep having this conversation. But to just outright say like this is how it should be, it's like you can say that, but if you're wanting to build bridges, like you've got to hear what I'm saying, that that's just not a good enough reason for me yet.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean I need to wait until a temple gets burned down before I agree with you.
Yeah.
But like I would need more convincing. And I think a lot of the community feels that way, that they would need a lot more convincing.
That's fair. I think I can, and I'll work out my own thinking on this a little bit more as well. But
yeah, I would love to have this conversation again in like a week or something and see how we both are landing on it still.
No, sure. We can do that. We can go live in a week or so and have the same comment. Yeah,
cool. So. Well, let's message and figure out if we want to answer like a specific question or something like that.
Okay. Okay.
Cool.
Well,
all right. Well, it's 7:46. This was like super great. Thank you for like doing this with me. This was awesome.
Yeah. No, happy to do it. And thanks for talking with me and been very kind. And so I appreciate that. And so, yeah, it's been crazy, but thank you so much.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, fun fact. I will be in Spencer's comment sections for the next couple of days. So just be a nice person. Okay.
Okay.
Let's all just be nice to each other. I'm talking to the chat here. Be nice. If you follow me and you're like a raging ex-Mormon, that's fine. Don't go harass Spencer.
Ex-Mormon.
You can't harass my friends.
Yeah, ex-Mormons, I just want to say I love you guys, and I hope I didn't trigger any of you super hard in this video. I hope we continue to have good conversations here. So.
You're great. Thanks.
Okay. Have a good night.
And Spencer. Everybody, I think that was a great conversation. I feel like I understood what he was saying, and I feel like we found a lot of common ground. That was super, super awesome. And I hope that all the Mormons will also be nice to all the ex-Mormons. Hey, other Spencer.
Wow. I thought you were cool before. I don't know if we can hang. You're like incredible.
Thanks, man.
I'm not just saying. I've rarely seen such a well-measured, precisely delivered. I don't want to use the word takedown, but fuck, that was insane.
It was a great conversation. I really enjoyed having it.
Yeah, I know you weren't intending to take down, but I've started to feel like a little bit bad.
No, because here's the thing, like when I am talking to people, like rarely am I trying to convince them why I'm right. Like I just, like I don't know if anybody noticed, but it was probably the first like 30 minutes of the conversation. I was just asking clarifying questions. Like,
oh, I know. I was like, oh, is Audrey, is she interviewing him or what's happening? And
like
then
I didn't
was
even
like, oh, okay.
A rebuttal to his claim for like probably at least 30 minutes. Like I just listened to him. Like you got to listen. And the reason I listened to him for 30 minutes instead of him me is because he was the one making the claim.
So he's working to be a lawyer. Have you thought about being a lawyer? Because you fucking kill it.
No, that's a lot of school.
I know.
Ex-Mo president. Thanks, Gisela.
Audrey is our leader. Audrey is our leader. The comments were fine. Thanks everyone for being mostly chill. I only had to mute one person. I think most people know them.
I saw a lot of emotion in the comments, which is absolutely to be expected, and that was never the expectation, is that people weren't going to get emotional. But it did seem like it was pretty good faith, and that it was pretty. People were expressing. I hope, I don't know if anybody realized, but I completely ignored the chat. So you guys were talking
I noticed.
to each other.
Well,
But,
I messaged you in the background, but
I know I saw you. I saw you. But like, the reason I ignore the chat on like a debate like that is because it will completely derail the whole conversation.
yeah. I get that.
Like, the only reason we do it live is so that people can watch.
I liked your point about, and it's an interesting one, the discussion around, what's the threshold for recognizing harm or violence, potential for violence. And I was trying to think of any news, because I think if some violent ex-Mormon did something to Mormons, you would have heard about it. I would hope you would have heard about it.
That's the problem with news, right? Is that we all live in our own bubble. And so
True.
What he was talking about, the claim he was making about like, oh, this is going to cause harm in the real world. My concern here is that people are going to run away with that, when he was not saying that he had any evidence to his claim. He was posing this hypothetical idea. He was exploring this concept. He wasn't stating it as a claim yet.
Yeah.
And I think that's valuable and important to remember. And I do think that that's a conversation worth having. Because if we're not willing to have that conversation, I don't think it needs to be all of our time, but I don't think it's a conversation that you can just dismiss off the bat, because when somebody makes a claim of harm, it deserves investigating.
It may seem like a bit of deflection to say this, but I think the more concerning thing would be reports of SA in the church, the missionary today, the leaders, and how the church isn't doing anything. No, I mean, as far as like propelling people toward a violent disposition with regards to the church.
So it is a deflect, and it is an appeal to hypocrisy. I don't know if you noticed that, but I think
for me to say that?
Yes. So the reason being,
go ahead.
There's a difference between prioritizing things, which I think is totally valuable, and dismissing an argument by saying like, hey, when are we going to start looking at the harm being caused to the church? And then immediately saying, well, the church hurts other people. That's an appeal to hypocrisy. You don't have a right to, like, you're invalid because of you do the same thing. So I think we have to be careful about dismissing a claim just because it's of the source, right? Like, not all claims deserve the same investigation and stuff, but to just say, well, the church hurts other people, that's actually a logical fallacy. You're not exploring the claim. So you don't have to do that, but like, it's just realizing that that's not a logical response, because it does deviate.
Well, his argument was that the act of dancing in temple robes is going to lead to violent outcomes.
So that wasn't actually his argument. I thought it was, but that's why I asked all the clarifying questions. So he was separating entirely. So what was kind of happening, and what I would love to chat with him about so that we can be more precise next time, was that he was saying this concrete thing of, I think that people shouldn't use signs and tokens in their videos. And then when he kind of got off into the weeds, he would wind up with, well, and we don't want to do these things in general. So his claim actually changed, which is what I was trying to explain, that like, that's not actually a defense, because your claim is different now. Like, you've lost me. They're not either they're not really, we have to table that for now, because they're not related, because you have no reason now this is arbitrary. It's causing all sorts of other problems. So
Fair enough.
Yeah. So it actually making that argument completely deteriorates his claim, which is why he kind of got from it.
What you're saying is my point isn't invalid, but it is invalid as a means of showing disagreeing with what he's saying.
Yeah. So
fair enough.
You're not wrong to say, like, I'm just repeating for the chat mostly, but like, you're not wrong to say the sexual abuse within the church is a huge problem. I'm not saying that that's not a problem, but what I'm saying is that that's
I'm
not a
not
response.
saying what I'm trying to say actually is it seems more likely that that would lead to a violent action than someone dancing in a temple robes.
True.
That's what I was trying to say.
But that is a deflection. Now we have a comparison, right? And where he wasn't trying to make a comparison. His argument wasn't people dancing in temple robes is more dangerous than what the church is doing. It's just like people dancing in temple robes could eventually at some point, what if that turned into issue? When do we have this conversation? So that's why that response doesn't work. It's not because that's not the claim he was making. If that's the claim he's making, because like you're straw manning him, right? Because that's not the claim he's making. He's not saying it's more important or even as important. He's existing in a universe outside.
And I'm not saying that either. I was just using it as an illustration to say it seems more likely. That's all.
Yeah. No, and I agree with you. And that's something to consider too, but it doesn't actually debunk or refute the original claim. That's all I'm pointing out.
Yeah, that was great though. I don't know if anybody else wants to join in. I want to take up all the air, but if someone wants to chat with Audrey, feel free. But yeah, I'm gonna be thinking about that for a while. I didn't record it, so I'm just gonna sit and think about it.
No, that was so fun. I feel like that was really good. I feel like it was hopefully demonstrative of good faith conversation.
I think so. Yeah. that was so good. I'm kind of without words, so I'm gonna peace out for a bit. Because wow, that was so good. Okay, take care.
Bye. Thanks for moderating. I appreciate it. All right, I'm like reading the chat now. What did you guys think? How did it go? Hey, girl.
Hey. Sorry, I've still got crappy flu voice, so
thanks, Jack Norman.
I'm gonna sound really great. I just wanted to say I think it was great that you're also making sure that we're honest to ourselves with our own tendencies to strawman and things like that.
100%.
When we don't even realize we're doing it because we're like, why don't you see these problems? But it's so important that we're not falling back on our habits from being a Mormon, because heaven knows it's always tempting.
Right. And that's the whole point. Like, I've been doing that on my channel so much recently of like, hey, this is like a straw man. And it's not to say you're wrong. Just because you made an illogical argument doesn't mean that you're objectively incorrect. It just means like, that's not a valid argument, right? Like, so to say, but what about all the harm the Mormon church is causing? I'm not telling you that that's not important. The only thing I'm saying is that if you're using that to refute the claim, you're wrong. If you're trying to divert from the claim, then you're not being intellectually honest. So you got to come to terms with that. Like conversations are so hard. And this is why debate is so difficult. Like, it's so hard.
So my sister just messaged in the chat. She wants to know if she can join or take my place. I don't know if you know her. She's the tattoo artist that's been doing a lot of Exmos, Marrow in the Bones. That's funny. And it's totally fine if not. I'm just letting you know. She asked in the chat. But
yeah, for sure. I don't know what her handle is.
Marrow in the Bones.
Oh, okay. Yeah, send me a little request.
So, Robin, go to the bottom where it says multi-guest. It has 2 people next to it, and say request.
Yeah. Okay. So we can only talk about one thing at a time from the chat. It is so true. Like, we literally have to talk about one thing at a time. Like, if you watched both of us, we would stop the conversation and we would come back to base. Like, we were only talking about one issue. I was worried that some of you were going to be getting frustrated with me in the chat because I was ignoring you. And you're like, but that's not even true. And I'm like, just relax. That's not what we're talking about. Yeah, bad reasoning can still be objectively correct. That is true. And that's one of the issues, is that people think that just because they came to the right conclusion, that it doesn't matter how they got there. It fucking matters how you got there, because we don't know what objective truth is. So we all have to keep learning. So it does matter how you got there.
It really does. It's kind of like, there's an argument that, it says multi-guest is turned off. So you have it set for one guest.
What?
I don't know how to do that.
No, it's in there.
Well, I can always jump off. You guys have seen my face enough, but yeah, I just wanted to say I thought you did a great job with, maybe it's because, no, even if you're not friends, do you have it set for friends only?
Does she have at least 1,000 followers?
She does have 1,000 followers.
So somebody just said, but for real, he used the C word and we couldn't respond with the word he used. I didn't hear him say the word cult, but maybe I just wasn't paying attention. But you're right. I don't allow that word in my chat or my comment section because it's just super unproductive and it annoys me.
Yeah.
That's why. Because it annoys me.
Yeah. I think it's hard to have any kind of productive conversation if you're using that word, because everyone immediately thinks of drinking the Kool-Aid and like the absolute worst groups of people that have ever existed. Like, you don't think about, Jehovah's Witnesses, who, they're weird and have weird beliefs and do weird things, but they're not like followers of Charles Manson.
Yeah.
So there's just such this negative connotation.
For sure. So people are saying he did. I don't know when that was. So if you remember, like, somebody said, I think there's a space for the word cult. Sure. It's not this space, though. So I agree with you. I think there is a space for it, but it's not this one. Too sensitive to have a productive discussion about the church. That makes sense. It's not for everyone, and it's hard to do.
And for me personally, I also don't make temple clothing videos just because I still try to have some awareness of how I could be coming across to my family and friends that are still members. I don't want to risk them the small chance that they'll come across my TikTok and be like, oh, is that really productive for me to still have a relationship, or that kind of thing. It's just, and I'm not like, I don't condemn people who do, because I think it's your own page, it's your own space. There's nothing different from this to going on Facebook and saying,
oh, I lost you.
Is that how you want? But
this person said, oh, it's a whole new world. Hi. She said, what is the end goal? What is the productive conversation, in my opinion? In my opinion, a productive conversation, I just want to learn more about the world. I want to get better at communicating, and I want to understand people and their ideas, because that is how I have learned to make the best choices, is by just continuously trying to understand people's ideas. So that to me felt like an incredibly productive conversation. I think that it was productive for the people watching, because I think people maybe learned some new things about conversing. And but that's how I'm currently defining productive. Like, I have no issue with dividing with people who productivity for them is like making people laugh, right? This is great.
Did you get a chance? Oh,
sorry, go ahead.
Did you get a chance to watch the live with Bridger and Alan Mont last night?
No, but I heard about it, but I didn't.
So they did such a good job. And honestly, I ended up sending Bridger a message, because I think even though it's so hard and we can feel invalidated by the things that members say to us about our trauma, it's also really disingenuous of us to say, well, you're not actually hurt by what I'm saying and doing. That's all exactly in your head.
That is a stupid thing to say. Like, it's belittling and it's condescending and it's also untrue because they are experienced. Like, it is a form of harm. Like,
and I think just being aware that, sure, we think they might be being oversensitive and, you know, why are they being offended about this? But they are. And
yeah, you just have
it's worth listening to them and being like, I'm sorry that you're hurt by this, and kind of, you know, have a back and forth. And it might not change that people are making those videos, but it's still important that we have that mutual respect of feelings if someone's genuinely hurt.
For sure. Like, you can't sit over there on the moral high ground dismissing other people's pain because of your, like, that's, again, this is the problem with so many of these rebuttals, is like, I look at these rebuttals and it's just completely irrelevant to the claim being made. Like, if you want to change topics, then just say that. Like, if you want to talk about something else, then let's just talk about something else. Let's be clear about what we're doing, and let's be very deliberate in the way that we discuss. Somebody just said, like, how do, like, Mormons make it more comfortable for ex-Mormons? That's a whole nother conversation, and that's really interesting.
And I also feel like asking how they can make it more comfortable right now is kind of deflecting, because this is very specifically,
it's 1,000,000%. That, like, it's 100% deflecting. It's not even kind of deflecting. So if I tell you, if they're saying you making temple videos is harmful and you should stop doing that, and you say, well, what are you doing to make my life better? What? That's completely irrelevant to the claim being made. Like, and that's not to say that that's not an important conversation. That's not to say that's not a conversation that should happen. That's not even to say that it may not like retain some bearing. Oh, but definitely. It's a completely separate discussion. Like, you've now answered their question by changing the topic.
Yeah. And that's what's funny, is I know we all do it all the freaking time. Like, I catch myself doing it and I'm like, nope, I'm totally saying I don't want to talk about this, so let's move on to this other thing that I think is worse. Like,
and that's what people do all the time. Like, I'm really, really hoping, and it's whatever, man. Like, some people just like to troll, and that's fine. I interacted with a troll, like, today. Yesterday, Douche Canoes. I had to block him because I'll, like, let trolls go and make maybe a couple videos because it's kind of funny. And then eventually I'm just like, you're annoying, and I'll block them. But
I honestly don't get many trolls anymore, but I think partly because I only ever use Exmo tags, so I don't get much visibility outside of Exmo TikTok, which is kind of where I want to be personally, but it's been a while.
So Lasers28, Spencer, I think he was asking us to give preference for his worldview, just as I was asking to give preference to my worldview. We have to learn to communicate and talk together. So to be like, well, he was only wanting it for him, but I'm just wanting it for me. I don't just get to start from the base of I'm objectively correct and you have to prove me wrong. Like, of course he wants us to give preference to his worldview. We all do. My worldview would be one that's, like, super inclusive. I would love for us to give preference to that.
And knowing and understanding that people are really, really shaped by their own life experiences. Alan was talking about this last night, and realizing that things that might have been super offensive, end of the line, I'm leaving the church right now, might not feel that way for a lot of Mormons, and things that we're just like, why is this a big deal for us to talk about? And they're like, why are you sharing the secrets of our faith? This is so awful and unkind of you. When we're like, this shouldn't be a big deal. Like,
this is a huge in-depth conversation. It requires a lot of listening, as, like, anybody who stuck through that whole ass live, like, again, listening and listening and listening and listening and asking clarifying questions. Like, generally, if you see me engage with people, I will ask clarifying questions for the first couple times before I will challenge their claim. Like, it's way too easy to strawman. I agree. There was was somebody else. I really do need to get off, guys. I've been on here for like 2 hours.
I can jump off so someone else can jump on too.
Oh yeah, I think your sister wanted to hop on, so I'll chat with her for a second. I learned about logical fallacies both in school and also just on my own. You can Google logical fallacies. You can start watching debates, see if you can spot them. But about the structure.
Hey, I was super impressed with you, Audie. You don't really know me, but like I do watch your videos and stuff. But there was one point in the conversation where I just like really wanted to know, like, if we went down a little bit different of an avenue.
Mm-hmm.
Because Spencer was talking about like how well, there's like anti-Semitism and like why is it like not okay to like talk about Jews or whatever. Right. And like I felt like my rebuttal to that would have been like, well, like Jews, like, okay, like I know that using Judaism is hard because it's like a religion and an ethnicity, but like Jews or people who like were ex-Jews or like non-practicing Jews or whatever, like that is their heritage, that is their experience, that was their religion. So like for them to talk about that's not the same as like me like starting a TikTok channel on like why I think everything Jews do is stupid. Do you know what I mean? Like, because it's like Judaism isn't my heritage. Like, it's not like I have nothing like to the table that I could bring to like that's valid, and it doesn't like serve a community for like one person to be trying to comment on something they don't understand. But like when like it's the whole thing with like the Muslims and the hijabs, like that's their religion. If they want to leave it, if they want to burn their hijabs, if they want to protest, it's a system that like oppressed them.
So let me jump in here really quickly. So the point in the conversation you were talking about, from my memory, and again, this was a very long life, but when he was talking about like anti-Semitism and stuff, what he was specifically talking about is how speech can be used to harm others because it can foster harmful ideals, right? So like we as a society already, the point he was making is we as a society already police language. So what he's advocating for is policing language in this specific way. So he wasn't necessarily talking about, so it seems like that might have like inspired your thought, but it doesn't seem like connected. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I just think that like yeah, I guess so, but I think it was just more like the whole picking on a specific religion. Like,
gotcha.
It doesn't seem to make sense when you were like when that is you. Does that make sense? Like when it comes from you, like he's talking about like wiping out like the Mayans or whatever, and it's like, yeah, but it wasn't Mayans taking down Mayans, right? Like,
so is your argument that because it's ex-Mormons taking down Mormons, it's different than like an ex-Mormon taking down a Jew or like Judaism?
Kind of, yeah, because like you
so
said,
okay, so is it a little bit of the argument of like, this was my religion, I can talk shit if I want to?
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like I wonder what he would have like said about that, because it's like you said, it's your experience, like it's your, but like I don't go around talking about anyone else's religion that I don't understand.
Yes. So that is an approach that I've seen a lot of people make to his claim. It's my experience, so I own it. That wasn't the approach that I made, and that wasn't the claim that I was defending. And there's a couple reasons why. One of them is the claim he's making, because he had actually two separate ones. But the main one was like, you shouldn't use the signs and tokens in the public square because it's disrespectful. And he had like a couple of reasons why. So whether or not that person is Mormon or ex-Mormon was not part of his argument, or ex-Mormon or Jewish or Catholic or whatever. So because his argument wasn't about who was doing the thing, but rather the thing that they were specifically doing, I didn't approach it in that perspective because it didn't seem to me to be like as precise of a version of the claim. And I felt it would be more productive to talk about the things we did, which is like your space, whatever. The idea of you owning your own experience, or like, it's my religion, I can talk shit about it. That was more what we were discussing. We were talking about, well, this is my experience and I own my experience. Even if you've had a similar one, I shouldn't mock yours, but like I can mock my own.
Mm-hmm. No, like I think you took it in a really like good direction, and like I think like you did way better than I ever could. I was just so
great
to hear like what your thoughts would have been on like an argument like that, because I just kept thinking like I just kept feeling like what he was saying is it's not the same thing when you're the one who lived it. Like a person who was oppressed by this religion, like speaking out against this religion, like just like the Muslim people, the Muslim women who like are speaking out or like protesting against their own religion. Like it's not the same thing as me doing that against the Muslim religion.
So what I would do if I was going to take that approach with him, I would first need to ask a clarifying question, because that whole argument hinges on, does it matter who's doing the video? Does it matter who's making the video? Right.
Yeah.
And so that's so I wouldn't even make that claim at first. I would ask the clarifying question, because I would be like, okay, well, does it matter who's doing the video?
Yeah.
If it doesn't matter who's making the video and it only matters that the video is getting made, then that point is like, okay, well then it's answered, because it doesn't even matter who's doing the video.
Yeah, totally.
Then it's a different claim. But if it did matter who was doing the video, then I would probably have a couple of more questions.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense.
Yeah. So that's where I would start with that one. I always try to figure out what my argument hinges on, see if I need to ask any clarifying questions, and then kind of go from there. Because if we wanted to have a completely separate discussion about, is it the same if it's somebody from your faith or if you're mocking someone else's, like that's just a different discussion, you know, that would involve like me making a claim, and I wasn't trying to make a claim. Because we were talking about it. So yeah.
Really. And I just kept thinking about like, and I said this a couple times, so I just kept thinking about like in like the FLDS religion, like what was going on in their temple was so sacred to them, but it was like horrific.
Yeah.
Right. But like if no one ever talked about it, like if they were like, nope, this isn't like, this is off limits, like no one can publicly know about this, like it basically just allows for bad things to happen, you know?
Yeah. So that approach, that argument or refute, like rebuttal or whatever, hinges on oh shit, my entire train of thought left my brain. Whoa. What was
I think maybe you were gonna say like it hinges on the how the conversation began, like how you don't respect and I do.
Oh no, I remember. Sorry. It hinges on sacredness and the concept of sacredness. So the concept of sacredness is the concept is some ideas deserve respect. Right. And my rebuttal to, and that was something we addressed in the beginning. It was something that we fundamentally disagreed on. We never came to an agreement on that. I don't believe that ideas ever deserve respect. I think people do, and I think ideas should always be criticized. I guess we could define respect and you know, finesse this concept a little bit more, but I don't think that something gets respect or something is off limit just because it's an idea that's held sacred to people. So that is something we fundamentally disagreed on. Because we disagreed on it, we moved past it for the sake of the rest of the argument. So we were like, oh, okay, cool. So this is a difference in belief systems. So let's move on from there. But I think that is a super good point. And I agree. I don't think that ideas deserve respect. So the sacredness argument, this doesn't really fly to me because nobody's pitched it to me in a way that would ensure that we are still critical of all ideas. So
yeah,
I've never had that pitched to me in a way that didn't seem stop-stopping.
Yeah. Well, thanks for letting me come on and ask my questions. I just like really wanted to pick your brain, and I appreciate it. Sorry to like hijack the conversation.
No, you're totally fine.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, it was fun with you.
Bye.
Okay, let's see. My question to him is at what point is respectability politics and when is it building bridges? That would be a good question. I think it's just the line where sacredness is drawn. I think that there is value in that concept. How is this different than Mormon comedies like Singles Word and mocking experiences in the church? That's a good point. Critique is such an important part of examination. Yep, absolutely. Oh, yep. Thanks, Kirk. Okay. All right, everybody. I gotta go. My brain is fried. Thank you for sticking with. Make sure to follow along. And this was super, super fun. I want to do more scheduled lives in the future. So if you loved it, comment on a video of mine and tell me that you loved it. I love you all. Thank you for being respectful and kind. Peace and love.